Hey, hello, I'm Kråkan, also known as Scarecrow, and welcome to Closet Movie Rambles, where I talk about old movies that I found in my closet while cleaning. This week's movie is Scarface, starring Al Pacino, Stephen Bauer, and Michelle Pfeiffer. It was directed by Brian De Palma in 1983, and it's about 2 hours and 42 minutes. It was inspired by the movie of the same name. It deals with gangsters in the Prohibition era. Basically, it's bootleggers and gangsters. And the 83 version is more of an immigration story, so I'll get into that and I'll talk a little bit about it. So, the opening credit shows basically the immigration from Cuba to Florida, or the American coast there. So what happened was, in the 80s, Fidel Castro on Cuba, the dictator of Cuba, basically decided to open up a port so that they could trade, I guess, with the United States. That led to a lot of immigrants escaping to the United States and sort of that kind of thing. So there was a whole bunch of people. There was 125,000 immigrants that fled to the coast. 25,000 of those were criminals. There's where the movie starts. You get introduced to Al Pacino's character, Antonio Montana, or Tony Montana as he's mostly called during the movie. So he's interrogated by a couple of cops, and they try to find out who he truly is. And they accuse him of being a criminal, and he's got a scar on his cheek. That's because the movie Scarface, basically. And they talk about he has a prison tattoo. It's right between in this part. So if it's like that, you can't see it. But if you move it up, open, you can see it. It's one of those prison kind of gang tattoos, or it pops up. So they accuse him of all these kind of things, and he basically puts on a speech about communism, how if you were strict of all your rights and everything and put into this situation, you would feel like me. There's no, and he confesses to it that he's done some crime, but not the most brutal crimes. They're basically interrogating him about drug deals that he has done, but he denies all that, and they take him to a place called Freedom Town, which is basically a camp where they put all the immigrants in. It's underneath the bridge, and there's these tents, just basic tents, where they don't know where the house is, and we just put them in tents. And during the trip to this camp, Freedom Town, he talks to one of his friends, Manny, and they talk about, like, how did you plea and all that. And he said they didn't go for it. And like, well, what do you mean? Yeah, I said I was into sanitation, but I didn't believe it. You were not supposed to say sanitation, you were supposed to say sanitarium. You were crazy, but now you're cured, so you're fine. But they end up in that place, and they eventually they just want to get out of there. So a month passes, and Manny comes up with a deal to get out of there and making something out of themselves, I guess. So there's an assassination. They're asked to kill sort of a political refugees that has ended up in this camp, a person called Revenga. And there's something to do with the dictatorship and politics, and it's a really deep story. But anyway, Tony stabs him in the stomach, and he basically dies there. And they cut to them a couple of months later. They work at a street food restaurant called Comidas Latinas, not Latrinas, Latinas. And it's basically, Tony says, I didn't come to the United States to break my back and all this. It's a shitty job, And then they meet up with this shady guy that organized the hit in the first place. This guy is called Omar. And they talk a bit, and Tony is a bit of a small type gangster. He's very cocky, he's very arrogant, so he kind of pushes the deal. They were supposed to go for a small drug bust or something, but he convinced them to take like the whole pure coke deal and basically stealing from the Colombians, and they'll get $5,000 for this. So they basically can get out of their shitty situation and all that. And that's what happens. They take the job. Tony quits his job and he throws his apron at his boss and says, I quit, you know, fuck you, or whatever, kind of cocky kind of situation. So we cut to sometime later. They're driving down to Miami Beach to meet up with these dealers. And Tony has, of course, a plan. So there's 4 guys in the car, and 2 of them wait in the car. Basically, if something goes wrong, Tony says, if I'm not back in 15 minutes, come get me, because this is might go really south or something. So Manny and this other guy sits in the car, just wait for him. And I think Tony and the other guy is Angel. They basically go up to the flat and they talk to this guy about the deal. And Tony says, you know, show me the dough, you know, show me the stuff. And he says, I don't have it. Well, I don't have the money either. Where is it? And they kind of argue a bit, and then it goes really south, and they wind up changing Angel to a bathtub, or beside a bathtub with some handcuffs or something. And meanwhile, what this thing is going on, Tony's been held down by gunpoint, and the other guys in the car are not noticing the time just passes by. So the Hector, as the guy is called, he talks to Tony and says, like, okay, I'm gonna kill your friend if you don't tell me where the money is. And Tony kind of refused because he's already insulted Hector on so many levels, so he kind of has his pride. And his friend gets chained down or cut down by a chainsaw, and Tony is forced to watch. The brilliant thing about this scene is that it doesn't show any chainsaw actually cutting into a human being, but it's so graphical that it's cut out of some of the versions. But really, it's like the only thing you see is you hear the chainsaw and you see like blood splatter on the wall and on the people, but it's not really anything cut. You don't see any body parts or anything like that. But it's a brilliant scene anyway. So Tony is next. So he gets chained up by the bathtub, and by this point Manny realized that something has gone wrong. So he gets out of the car and he gets into Hector's apartment, and there's a shootout. Manny gets shot, and Hector escapes through a window and falls down to a couple of stairs. And Tony chases after him and shoots him point blank in the streets. And police sirens are blazing, and Manny and Tony basically escape in the car. And later they contact Omar, and Omar is kind of concerned about, did you get the dough? No, we didn't, but we got something better. We got both the dough and we got the cash, or something like that. But I don't want to go through you, Omar. I want to go to your boss directly. So they go to Omar's boss, Frank Lopez is called. And so they deliver the goods to Frank, and Frank kind of chuckles and offers him a drink. And Frank's wife shows up, Elvira, and of course Tony falls for her. And they kind of argue, Frank and Elvira were supposed to go out and eat, and there's this club. But anyway, they go out and they're supposed to eat, and we cut to a much later part when Frank is drunk and the music are blazing and on everything. It's in the middle of the club. And at this point, Frank is showing Tony the ropes, like the thugs, the dealers, high and lows of the criminal world. Kind of explains a bit how it works. And while this is going on, Elvira gets bored, and I think she asked Frank first if he wants to dance, and he said, no, I can't dance. And how about you, Tony? And Tony says, of course I can dance. And they go down to the dance floor and they dance. And Tony kind of hits on her, and she calls him a criminal, and you never be anything in this world, and you know, all kinds of this back and forth. And Tony has this cocky kind of attitude. He's small fry, but he kind of behaves like he's a bigger, it's all about balls or something. He's trying to prove himself, but she kind of pushes him away. And while this is going on, Omar is basically shit-talking Tony in front of Frank because Tony basically skipped the ladder. Omar has pretty much worked to get to where he's at this point, and Tony basically skipped the ladder because he kind of got on Frank's good side, did something ballsy, and he got a reward for it basically. Cut to 3 months later, and Manny and Tony is supposed to pick up Elvira. So they take their car and try to pick her up, and it's kind of funny. It's one of those low-riding cars with 80s kind of zebra or lion stripes on the seats. She's like, I'm not riding in that. Tony says, okay, okay. They go to a car dealer and they look at the car, and it's like a Porsche, I think, a silver Porsche, and they inspect it and they make some very funny jokes, and basically they leave Manny to pay for it all. It's kind of a funny scene actually. So in the next scene, we found out that Tony has a family in the United States, a mother and a sister named Gina. So he basically goes to visit them, and Manny drives him there by car, and he waits in the car for him. So, but his mom suspects something. He has a nice white suit on and goes in and talks, and she confronts him about his job and everything and what he does, and he offers them $1,000 right on the table. And his mom's like, no, this is blood money, this is not honest earned money, and he kicks him out. And Gina follows him to the car, and he tries to explain the situation and how everything is, and he gets in the car, and he realizes that Manny is looking at Gina kind of funny, and he says that don't touch my sister because you will regret it or something. And it's just that he's kind of jealous and overprotective, but it's really a really uncomfortable scene. And then later we cut to Omar and Tony going to Bolivia to a drug refinery to meet a character called Sosa, which he basically runs the place. And they sit down to eat something, and Omar is kind of reluctant to make the deal with Sosa. Basically, he doesn't want to do it over phone or anything. But he likes to talk to Frank before he makes deals. But Tony kind of pushes, like, making the deal right now. So Sosa kind of says, like, okay, Omar, you can go home and talk to Frank, and we will settle this later. But you can stay a bit, Tony. So that's what Tony does. And Sosa hands him a couple of binoculars. Well, first he looks in them to the sky where Omar is heading away with the chopper, and then he hands the binoculars to Tony, and he sees that Omar has been hanged from the helicopter basically. And Sosa says that he believed that he was a police informant and he couldn't trust him. And at this point, Tony kind of makes a deal for his life. He makes a deal for Frank. And when he returns to the States, of course, Frank is not happy about this deal. But Tony says, it will work out, I'll make it work out, And basically at this point he has stepped over the head of Frank. And Frank tells him straight up, do you really believe that Omar was a police informant and all this stuff? And he also said that money, drugs, and girls will not last. You have to keep it calm. You can't do this. You have to be chill about it. And then Tony, in a later scene, Tony talks to Elvira by the pool, and they got to know each other a little bit better. And he kind of want to get rid of Frank at this point, because Frank doesn't have any balls, as he says. And he asks Elvira, he sits down in one of the chairs right next to her, asks her about, do you love kids? I love kids, he says. and then basically he proposes and said he wants to marry her because obviously he has fallen for her. And but Frank is in the way of that. And that's sort of the thing, like Frank has to go. Even later, Tony and Manny goes to a club, and they get confronted by Mel Bernstein, the chief detective of narcotics, and they pull Tony aside to talk to him because he's really come up in the world of criminal. He's become more of a criminal in this, like, and by this time Tony also see that Gina is in the club, and he tells Manny to keep an eye on her while I talk to Mel. And it turns out that Mel is a corrupted cop, basically. So he takes bribes and stuff, and he kind of says, like, you have to pay me this amount and this and that. And meanwhile, Gina is dancing with this random guy, and Tony doesn't like that. He kind of has this black eye stare, and we talk about it, Tony. We talk about it later or something like that. And then Tony is not happy about this, so he goes directly to sit by Tina, sit by Elvira, and Frank doesn't like that. He says that to Tony, and Tony says, "You don't really have anything, Bo. You don't. The only thing in this world that matters are balls, and you don't got any of that, Frank." And Frank just looks at him, and of course he doesn't, so he looks at him and he goes away. And then Elvira leaves, and Tony sees that Manny hasn't really been looking, and this random guy takes Gina to the bathroom stall, and Tony follows, and he intervenes the action before something happens, And Gina basically says, "I'm a grown woman, I can do what I want," and Tony kind of slaps her in the face. He's very angry at this point, and he asks Chico to drive her home. And at this point, Tony is just sitting down on the side of the bar, a little stall by himself, and he's drinking. He's so wasted. He's sad. He's lonely. He doesn't know what to do. He's fucked up everything, basically. Everything has gone south. His relationship with Elvira, his relationship with Frank, and his sister and everything. He's just sitting there sobbing. And then a show starts. And you basically see that two assassins from across the room are targeting him. And he just sits there and waits it out. And the hitman gets distracted for a little moment, but then they start shooting. And Tony kind of throws himself under the table and fires at their legs and shoot them out, basically. And the whole bar it goes into chaos, and everybody's running, try to get away from there. And Tony gets shot in the arm, in the shoulder or something. And he basically realized that this hit was made by Frank. So he talks to one of his friends to call in a specific time, and to call Frank at a specific time. He won't tell this right away, but just say that we fucked up, we didn't kill him or something like that. So his friend is basically playing out that, making a response from Frank when he actually calls. So Tony and Manny goes down to see Frank, to confront them about this. And Frank plays innocent and says, like, "Well, oh, you hurt, you got shot and everything," and then the phone calls. And Tony has a gun on him just for protection, as he said. And Frank picks up the phone and answers it, and of course the thug on the other end, instructed to call at 3 o'clock or something, says, "Sorry boss, we fucked up." And Frank kind of says something lays down the phone. And Tony kind of make Frank beg for his life at this point. And the Mel, the narcotica detective chief, is sitting there in his room as well. There's something to do with bribes and stuff. So basically, Frank says, "Tony, you're not really gonna kill me." I am right. You're right. Manny, kill him. And Manny kills him. And then next in line is Mel. And Mel try to kind of get even ground, try to negotiate with Tony, like, okay, this is where we're at now, and this is how we can solve this. And Tony says no, and he shoots Mel down too, killing him. And then Ernie, which is the bodyguard of Lopez, is basically has been standing there, and he says, "Ernie, yeah." He's kind of scared for his life at this point because Tony might kill him too, you know. "You want a job? You want a job, Ernie?" "Sure, Tony, sure, I want a job." And it's kind of a funny scene. It's like, "Okay, report in tomorrow, or we call you, it'll be fine." And there's this funny thing when Ernie kind of takes a bottle of Jack Daniels, he just downs a bit, and like he's sweating. He's like, "Huh, he dodged a bullet on that one." And that's kind of a funny scene. And basically after that, it goes really well for Tony. So Tony takes everything. He takes Lopez's mansion, and he marries Elvira. He reconnects with Sosa, and he gets a pet tiger, and he installs a camera system. And at this point, he's really paranoid. It's not really paradise as he sees it. He argues with Elvira, and he doesn't really trust anyone other than himself. And Manny sets him up with a deal because he has a lot of money he needs to launder them, and the bank won't take him all. So Manny recommends this Jewish guy that can launder it for him. But it turns out it's an undercover cop, and he gets framed for laundering money basically. And he tries to escape this, but it's not really going well. And he goes to Sosa, which promised to help him with this if he helps him with the problem. There's basically a media figure that is trying to expose all these drug dealers and high up in the criminal world. So Tony is set to go to New York and fix this, taking the Shadow, Albert, with him. He's a guy that doesn't speak English, but he's good at what he do. He's basically an assassin, so you just have to take him there, and Albert will fix everything. So Tony goes to New York, and he basically asks Manny to keep an eye on things when he's gone. And he goes to New York. And Albert rigs this media person's kind of car, but it goes south because the media person is not there by himself, he's there by his family. So the family gets into the car and they start driving. And meanwhile, Tony gets cold feet because he says, he doesn't want to kill women or kids. So instead of actually killing the media profile, he kills the hitman instead. And then later he has to call up and check how everything is going. And then he realized that Manny has left the mansion some days ago or something, and he can't really find him. He doesn't answer his phone. So Tony has to get back to the mansion and fix things. And he goes back home, and of course Sosa finds out that he's been tricked, and he's like, the media profile has exposed all the drug kingpins and drug lords and everything, and it's not a real good situation. And on top of that, Tony's mom is called and said that Gina is gone. He can't find her. So he goes to his mom and try to get some information. He gets an address to where she is supposedly being. And he goes to this address, and it's one of those houses that Tony actually bought her. It's previously in the story, bought her for his bloody drug money or something. And he basically rings the door, and Manny opens it. And in a light kind of morning robe, a robe kind of, just robe, a bathtub robe. And he looks at Manny like, okay, what are you doing here? And he looks up on the porch or something inside, and up the stairs, and he sees his sister half naked, and his eyes goes black, and he's like, wait a minute, you have been sleeping with my sister. There's no words. He doesn't say anything, but his look explains everything. So he goes crazy, and he shoots Manny in the stomach. And at this point, he's highly drugged down with cocaine and all sorts of stuff, because he's had this discussion with Sosa earlier that he will fix it, and he basically lies to him, and he's ready to go to war. So he's just pushing all the kind of substances into him to just like deafen the senses. And of course, he shoots Manny down, and Manny dies, but he doesn't really react on it. But Gina is devastated, and she's gone out of her mind, and Tony basically take her back to her mansion to sort of fix things up, but nothing is going fine. And he goes upstairs, and he's in this haze. He's kind of gone. He doesn't know what to do or how things are going to be fixed. And it's just a big pile of cocaine, and he just smashes his head into it. Ask everybody to just leave. And then sometime later, Gina enters the room full of seductive pills, and she has a gun, and they start shooting at him. And she basically is kind of, this is what you wanted me, or something. And he's kind of so wasted on everything that he doesn't even realize at first that she is shooting at him. And meanwhile, while this is taking place, Sosa has sent some lower criminals to invade his mansion, basically. And no one has been keeping eye on the security, so everything goes to hell. There is a guy that climbs up to Tony's suite and crawls through the window, and he basically shoots down Gina because she's shooting at Tony, and Tony gets up and kills the guy. He realized that his sister is dead, and he goes to this kind of strange state, and he also realized that he has killed Manny, and everything goes down, and then he realized that the whole mansion, everything is under siege. He sees the security cameras, and he's like, okay. He kind of snaps out of it, and he goes for this weapon cabinet and picks up an assault rifle, and he just start gunning down all these people. And he goes out to the balcony of the outer area of like the hallway, and he shoots at people, and he takes many bullets, and he says like, is this all you got, is that everything you have on me? You puny little Buddhists can't take me. And then the room gets, there comes in more guys and start shooting and stuff. And then all of a sudden they stop, and he kind of stands there on this portion. Behind him comes a hitman that is not really described in the story, but he's there. He's called a Skull, and he's basically an assassin sent by Sosa to basically put Tony down, because he's unreliable, and because of you don't fuck with Sosa, basically. So he gets shot in the back, and he falls down the fountain, and then Tony basically dies. That's the end of Scarface. So I really like this movie, because in my head I thought it was something different. Maybe I got mixed up because I saw this movie a long time ago. But there are a couple of good references that I like to point out. And there wouldn't be a GTA series without Scarface, because it made a lot of influence. If you took a look at Grand Theft Auto 3, GTA 3, many of the radio stations, especially I think it's Flash FM, they play a lot of soundtrack from this movie, like all these 80s kind of stuff. And it's like if you haven't seen the movie Scarface, you wouldn't realize that at first, but it kind of influenced, and also it influenced the sequel to that, Vice City. I think we wouldn't have a GTA series if it wasn't for this. And I mean, Vice City is more or less Scarface, kind of from character to design to the whole 80 aesthetics. So, would I recommend this movie to anyone? Absolutely. I only have a few nitpicks here and there. It's like, it's a really good movie, it's well shot. I kind of don't like the character of Tony because he's very aggressive, very ballsy, kind of, you know, things will go bad for him, and he doesn't really care, and he only cares for himself and what he wants. Another thing is that it's a bit too long. While writing this movie, there's 11 pages of script that I write with just words, trying to puzzle it all together. And it took me, as I said, like 2 days to get through it. Multiple cities, because I couldn't really sit down one night and just plow through it, because it was so encumbersome just to, you know, get it all together. And I was like, I have to sleep. I'll take it up to tomorrow. So I'm really glad that this review is over, because, you know, this is something I like to do, that I'm really passionate about, and you know, pushing out some content that makes me feel good. So right now I feel really good when I'm done with this, and not so good when I was watching it. But I hope you like this, and thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one.